Person. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Digital Influence Show. It is, what is it today? Tuesday, July 19th. And hey, I'm excited for today. Of course, I always say it. I know I can't help it. But Tom had some really cool stuff happen to him last week. And with Carson, is it Heady or Hetty?
Hetty, yes.
Carson Hetty from Microsoft, who closed a 9-figure deal through his efforts on LinkedIn. Now, I know most of us, a lot of us aren't out closing 9-figure deals. It's, but I think there's a lot that we can learn from it, from the anatomy of what he did to earn and close that deal. So, Tom, tell us the story, because I love what you did to get yourself in there as well.
And that's true. That's true. I was using social outreach just to get into the interview, but no. So I've known Carson. Actually, I met him on LinkedIn a few months ago, and yeah, he's an enterprise. He runs a team of enterprise account executives at Microsoft in their health services division. And the exact account that they close is not disclosed yet. This will be coming in a press release before too long here. But long story short is that he and his team worked on a deal for over 2.5 years that commenced on LinkedIn, and for the most part was managed all the way through on LinkedIn over the 2.5-year period. And yeah, the managed part is what I found really intriguing that we can dig into, because as I listened to him talk, I realized the things that they did to, you think about this at a macro level, right? With a huge literally $100 million plus deal. But a lot of what he was doing could be applied to any B2B sales cycle where there's multiple players and stakeholders involved. Yeah. He just happened to do it on a much larger scale. And anyway, we can get into that. But it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I think, Tom, too, I mean, what's very applicable for any of us is what the activity you did in order to get the right to interview Carson on his own show. Like, I mean, I think it just telling the story, and then I've got a little commentary to say on that for everybody.
Oh, about how I did the show, or how I got on the show?
Yeah, how you got on the show.
So I reached out to him, like I said, a few months ago on LinkedIn, because he has a show called Salesman on Fire. So we started talking, and ultimately ended up being on the show. So that was a few months ago. So where he interviewed me, and so we've, I guess, kept in touch, quote unquote, on LinkedIn, but that was a few months ago. And so when I saw that he had posted that he had won the 9-figure deal, I congratulated him, and I said, "Hey,"
in a comment. And
as I was sitting there in my mind, as I was reading his post about winning this deal, I had all these questions in my mind, and I was like, "Well, if I have all these questions in my mind, others must have these questions in my mind." So I just said, "What the heck?" So I wrote back and I said, "Hey, if you are up for it."
Did you write him, or did you comment?
Comment. All of this is on comment so far. Right. All very public. It's all there. So I went back and I commented on it, and I said, "Hey, if you would like someone to interview you on your own show because I have a bunch of questions. So, if you like someone to interview you and ask some questions about all this, I'm here to do that, just kind of throwing the offer out." Well, he got back to me right away on comment and said, "Hey, that sounds like a great idea." And then we took it offline from there to work out the logistics. But Carson's he just likes to try things that are out of the box and are new and interesting. And I think we both enjoyed it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what's cool about that is you and I talk about social media. I'm not wearing my social selling suck shirt today, but the reason that I wear it is because this concept of social selling is so prevalent, but really where the value is just being social. Mm-hmm. It's about connecting with people. It's about networking, but really it's about building connections with human beings, and that's what grows our influence. And so for you to, comment, "Hey, Carson, that's really cool. I've got all these questions." What a simple and great way to engage with somebody and get on their radar. And then what happened for you is he invited you to then interview him on his own show. And what more influence you've established. And I haven't asked Tom this, but Tom, how many people have reached out to you since then? Or maybe it hasn't aired yet. Or no, it has aired.
Yeah, it came out.
Um, yeah, but how many people have reached out to you as a cold connection request to you because they saw you interviewing Carson?
Yeah, I don't know the, attribution of that, but I definitely have had a lot more connections and follows in the last week or the
Yeah.
last few days than I had previously to that. And some connections with some really good quality people that I believe were connected to Carson um, as well. So I can only assume it came directly or indirectly through that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's such a great, like, yeah, the headline of it is the anatomy of a nine-figure deal, because we're all have to market and capture people's attention. But I know that for so many people out there, a nine-figure deal just isn't, closing $100 million deal isn't on their radar. But the components of it are. So, what were the components of what he did to close his nine-figure deal?
Yeah, this is what really hit me. And like I said, I think there's a lot that he talked about that's applicable to, smaller deals, even 5 or
Mhm.
6 figure deals. And what he, first of all, he started the outreach on LinkedIn. That's what we hear a lot, right? You talk a lot about is starting the outreach on LinkedIn with the goal of building, getting a meeting or getting a conversation started. Well, he did that. He did that though by reaching out to many different people in the organization, not just one, and building connections with multiple people in the organization till he ultimately was able to kind of stair step his way into the president's office through the people that he had connected with, if you will. So,
Mhm.
think about this. If I connect to a lower level person, then when I connect to the next person, I can say, "Hey, I'm connected to Joe, and I also thought I should be connected to you." And then I can use that to stair step my way up the ladder. But that was really just the beginning of the story. And what happened after that is he ultimately ended up connecting with over 200 people in the organization, and not just connecting, but building LinkedIn online relationships with 200 plus people in the organization. And when I started to think about that, I called it in the interview, the social pulse. He had a social pulse on that organization that probably nobody in the organization itself had about that organization, if that made sense. In other words, he
Yeah,
knew more
totally
about
makes
the
sense.
people and the people there than the people on the inside. And he used that as a way to, he didn't just, and so he, you talk about using content. He took some of their content and he would go back to the people that he was connected to and would say, "Hey, I always just wanted to make sure you had the latest, white paper, the latest piece of information, the latest blog post, the latest video. I just want to make sure that you've got this," right? It was really well done and how he did the conversation well. It wasn't like, "Hey, check out our webinar." It was more like, "Hey, Brandon, I want to personally make sure you have this, right? Or you have access to this, or right." So you feel very special when
Mhm.
somebody does that. So again, one of the takeaways I had from that is the tone and the narrative was as important as the connection itself. And so as the deal progressed, he had this like radar and social pulse on the organization, and he was constantly working that. And then he was introducing his other team members into there as well. So now the whole, different team members were going with there. And then the other thing that really jumped out at me is, over 2 years, people would leave, they would change jobs, they would
Mhm.
have, as soon as somebody new came in that was part of that ecosystem of stakeholders, he would connect with them. Well, guess what? he would become their best friend because he knew everything about the organization. And here's a new person coming into the equation that he can, answer all of those things. Now, I'll stop right there. There's a couple more things, but I'll stop right there in case you got some questions.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what I love hearing about that, and something I've struggled with a lot, is tone.
Yeah.
And how informal, how formal, do you come off as, I'm going to be the trusted advisor and share this, or do you? I think that is so crucial. I think a mistake that I've made over the years is tone. Not trying to be snobby or anything, but just try to, out of respect, being formal. And I think formal is just too stuffy these days.
It's in not, it wasn't even so much that he was informal, but it was more just, hey, I got something for you. Hey, I have something for you. It's the hors d'oeuvre tray is going around. Would you like one? That
Yeah,
kind of idea versus trying to force them to go read some content or whatever. It was,
right.
who knows who actually consumed all the content, but at least they could kind of count on him to know that they're going to keep them up to date, right? And keep making
Hmm.
sure that they have, things that could be relevant for them along the way. So it was, yeah, the narrative I think did play a part into that, and that's how you build that social pulse and that the relationship. Because one thing to have the connections is the other to have the actual relationship
Rapport. Yeah.
rapport. Yeah,
Yeah, and
good word.
I think what so much of that is speaking to is the mindset that Carson had through the process too. I mean, I would imagine that he actually did see himself as, the source of information for them. And when he just played that role, whether he was invited to be that role or not, as he played that role, he assumed that role in their mindset as well. And I'm sure that all contributed to, and I love that you said he had a better thumb on the pulse of that organization than people inside the organization. That's just brilliant.
Yeah, no, and but think about that because again, if you can listen to what he said, he was now he was part of the family, right? And I was part of the family from a virtual LinkedIn perspective. It wasn't because I was working in the office every day or anything like that. I was just part of the ecosystem and the family involved. And as a trusted advisor, people that they trusted, right? As new family members
Mhm.
came in or family members left, he was the common denominator, or their team, not him and his team, were the common denominator that kept everything moving along all the way through. The other thing that he brought up that I thought was really interesting is, and this is, I think, super applicable to anybody who's selling into B2B and there's multiple stakeholders or decision making units or whatever, is he would make sure that he had already covered and built relationships with the different players in the different decision making units. So if they said, hey, I got to go talk to Mary over in whatever, he's like, oh, yeah, I've already got with Mary, got her some information. She's good. Right. I mean, think about the proactive aspect of that when you're, selling, and for example, I know we work a lot, with LeadSmart with manufacturers and distributors and companies that sell large, volumes of different product SKUs to different parts of the organization and all of that. And they're always looking for making sure that they have the right decision-making units. And just think if you can build the relationships with all those decision-making units. Again, you probably know more. No, you don't need to go talk to Mary. I already have Mary. I already talked to Mary. She already knows everything that's there. So he was covering the basis on the ecosystem. And so as a result, the deal flowed. And I thought about
Mhm.
it. It was like, it was almost like it couldn't have not closed. It was just going
Right.
to organically close through everything that was going on there.
Mhm. Now, how specifically did he do that? Was you're saying like, oh no, I already talked to Mary or whatever? Was this combinations of email? Was it direct messages? Was it sharing social content? Started texting people? Like, where were the communication mediums that were being used?
I don't know all the specifics. I know certainly through LinkedIn and through social, right? So, again, the idea being, hey, Brandon, I'm talking to you, but you have another partner that you want to, you need to get approval or buy-in from to do something. So if I say to you, Brandon, hey, let's move forward, and you say, well, wait a minute, I need to go, fill my partner in on all of this. and I go, oh yeah, I'm already talking to your partner, or if nothing else, I've provided some information to them already, right? So maybe I haven't had a conversation, but at least I now know when you go to your partner, they should know who I am because there's been some connection. Or so again, it's building that ecosystem. I don't know if he continued and expanded that on phone or email, or I'm sure some he did and some he didn't, right? I'm sure it was different from different players, given there was 200 of them in the mix.
Yeah. So, Tom, what were your biggest takeaways from the processes and obviously the outcome that Carson had?
Well, the biggest thing that hit me on the side of the head, as I mentioned earlier, is that social is not just for the initial outreach. That's just the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're not doing the outreach to get a meeting. You're doing an outreach to build a relationship. And then how do you continue to build that relationship in other parts of the organization? So relationships,
Mm-hmm.
plural. So I think and you always stress this, right? It's not about the transaction. It's about building where what we're trying to accomplish and what the outcome we're trying to create. I'm sure once this deal is done, it's not like they all go away either. There's
Right.
ongoing account management and everything that is going to be a million times easier now by having all those relationships in place
Yeah.
within all of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the biggest
Social.
takeaway. This is not just about the connection and the initial outreach. This is about the full journey.
Yeah. And I think that's so important and you said it, social isn't about the transaction. It's about connection. And I think that's where the difference is. A lot of, SDR, BDR, that's where social selling comes in. How do I use social to sell and get the meeting? And where I think that, the full cycle AEs and, field reps that are forced to use more inside sales tactics, they already understand that sales is about rapport, it's about relationship. And so seeing social as a tool to start the rapport, introduce yourself in a positive way, and start building those relational foundation through commenting so that they see you, they consistently see your name and your face, adding value by sharing information that's not, hey, take a look at our newest flyer, but hey, I was talking to this person and this is what they were going through and this is what they said. And you don't use their names, that's fine, and then you share it with your audience because you got 50 other people that have the same title, and when they
Mm-hmm.
read it they go, wow, that was valuable for me, I want to talk to you. um, you know Information has always been such a huge um, asset, and we have such a great way through social media to grow that equity
Yep.
massively and quickly and widely.
Nope, totally. And you'll be proud of me. I don't know if you've listened to the interview, but if you get the end of the interview, because Carson used the word social selling quite a bit throughout the
Hmm.
interview. And I said, what you just went over was not sound like selling very much. There's not a lot of selling involved there. It was just like you said, and I don't mean this trivially, but it was building the relationships, building the ecosystem of relationships, creating the groundswell, creating the agreements, it's just, I mean, I guess you could call that selling, but it wasn't selling from a point of view of, I'm trying to sell you something. It was something
Right.
that was actually facilitating a project and a process that led to that outcome. And like a
Yeah.
consultant, or, it just was done on an extreme.
Yeah. Yeah. I always see sales is a big umbrella, right? And then there's components of the umbrella. And I think where social really plays in is the ability to get introduced or introduce yourself. So it's the outreach portion, the introduction portion. And I struggle with the word outreach too, because usually if you think outreach, you think cold outreach, and it
Yep.
just kind of
Yep.
brings up
Yep.
cold
Yep.
calling, cold
Yep.
email, pound people like, I'm here, you need to
Tri-
see me, let me get in your face. Ah, right?
it implies transaction, right? I'm trying to get a
Right.
transaction or a specific, you know, some transactional outcome.
Right. But those early stages are about meeting, building a little bit of rapport. I mean, you have one chance at a first impression, right? And it's funny, I don't hear that as much as I used to. But you know, if your first impression is, oh my gosh, this person has sent me 6 emails unsolicited and 4 phone calls, it's really going to be hard to get that person on a Zoom call and be excited about it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's, you know, when you break down sales into the different components, right? For me, sales is kind of that middle component. And that's where you're overcoming objections and guiding them through, and you're still doing some research and asking questions. And then you go into your closing strategies. And then, you know, you've got the signature session, you know, portion of it. And then you got the handoff, and you got serving them and renewing them. Like
Yep.
sales is a big, huge beast.
It's,
And
it's a
this
perpetual
whole,
thing. Yeah.
yeah, and this term social selling gets thrown out flippantly. And I really believe it's one of the biggest challenges for most people and teams to actually use social well. It's like, oh, that's what marketing does. Really? As a salesperson, if I told you there's a ballroom down the road and it's filled with every single one of your buyers, would you want to be there? And if you do, how do you want to show up? Do you want to just walk around handing out your flyer to everybody, or would
Right.
you want to go develop conversations
Exactly.
and introduce and shake hands? So anyway, well, Tom,
Good example.
I know we're running out of time, but I want to let you kind of summarize this up. This was yours, and no, I have not listened to the interview yet. I know you texted me on Saturday. I actually took a weekend and had a full-on family weekend. My son and I went golfing. We took our daughter, you know, tubing down the river a little bit, and our
Wow.
other daughter's boyfriend was in town, and so I unplugged, and I hardly ever unplug for the entire weekend, but I did. So I do have it on my calendar though, and I think I'm going to listen to it this
You can
evening on
listen
my
at a
drive
one and a
home.
half speed. You know, now that you have the basics of it already, right? You
Yeah,
can zip through it. But no, I think there'll be more to come. And you know, I'm starting to get questions, and I think Carson's even up for like maybe a sequel where we might do a more deeper dive on some of this, because I think, you know, you kind of peel the onion, right? One layer leads to more questions and more of those things. But yeah, I think there's just a lot to learn, or a lot to apply and take away on this. And I'm trying to, you know, even use it in my own world. But I think about that social pulse that we mentioned. And anyway, I just think that
yeah,
is, having that is invaluable in when you're
yeah,
trying to do any sort of B2B sale, you know, larger or small. So
yeah, absolutely. That's really good. All right, well, everybody, hey, thanks so much. If you joined on, I know we went a little bit later than normal today, and but we'll be back. I think Tom and I are really enjoying this every Tuesday and Thursdays, and just chatting with what we're learning, what's coming up. And if anybody out there, you want to join us, you have a topic, send it to us, put it in the comments, or message us, or call us, or text us, or skywrite. I don't really care. And if you want to be on and join us in the conversation, please do. This is just meant to be an open forum. You know, we think we're pretty smart about a few things, but we know we're not smart about everything, and we just want to be surrounded by smart people. So here we go.
all right. Have a good afternoon. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Tom.